Salmon Falls Township in 1860, western El Dorado County. Who lived here? Hi, I'm Kevin Canals, and I have been reviewing the census records from 1860 along the north and south fork of the American River, primarily the gold regions, to see what were the demographics, who lived in this area. So this is a little stream that feeds into the South Fork of the American River. I'm about 3 miles upstream from the town of Salmon Falls. And Salmon Falls was a township, a census tract within western El Dorado County, and it was fairly large, about 65 square miles. The northwest boundary started at the confluence of the North Fork and the South Fork of the American River, and it went up to above Rattlesnake Bar, about 1.5 miles, to Manhattan Bar, and then went east, and then kind of made a little jog, and then came down and intersected the South Fork of the American River at Weber Creek, where Weber Creek comes into the South Fork, went up Weber Creek a couple miles, and then shot down diagonally to the Sacramento County line just north of Clarksville. So the township was primarily comprised of a topography of steep river canyons, the North Fork and the South Fork of the American River and Weber Creek. The southern portion was more rolling foothills, conducive to settlement, but there wasn't much gold there and there wasn't a lot of water, so that limited people from settling there. But really the driver for this area was gold mining. Now the township did have a couple attributes, one of them being the water ditches. We had the North Fork ditch along the North Fork of the American River that did actually send water over to El Dorado County at some places. We had a minor ditch that ran along the north side of the South Fork below Salmon Falls and took the water to Negro Hill and Massachusetts Flat. And then the big ditch, the Natoma ditch, which had a dam at Salmon Falls and diverted water down to Folsom. But a lot of that water didn't get south into the township, so that imported or exported water, however you want to say, was primarily used for mining. So the census comprised 34 pages, 40 entries per page. I went through and transcribed all of those, and the population in 1860 for the Salmon Falls Township was 1,360 individuals. And they were scattered across 336 dwellings, I believe. The largest percentage of residents were Chinese immigrants, 664, which was 49% of the population. Europeans, people born in Europe, comprised 19%. 2% of the population was from North America, Canada, the West Indies, and 30% of that population, 413 people, were born in the United States. If we look at the European immigrants, the largest share were from England and Ireland, about 47 and 44 people. Next came Germany, which represented about 15% of the population, Portugal and France, and then some of the other European countries. And there were also people from Austria, Prussia, Spain, and Wales living in the Salmon Falls census tract. If we review those people born in the United States, the largest percentage, 25%, were born in California. 106 people had their birth listed as California. All of those people were 11 years old and younger, so they were children. That means that less than 400 people, adults, were in the Salmon Falls area that were born in the United States. The largest state that had representation was New York at 78 individuals, Maine at 45, Massachusetts at 36. So you can see a large influence from the New England area, and then you can see other states in this graph from people that came from other eastern countries. Now, within the census recorder was given the latitude or to put down the race of the individual, and it was up to them to determine what the race was. Now, of all of the Chinese individuals, the race was MON, Mongolian. So all Asian people were listed as Mongolian, and that accounted for 49% of the individuals here. Now, the Salmon Falls census tract included Negro Hill, which you would think that might have a large contingent of Black Americans, and maybe it did in earlier years, but by 1860 there were not very many Black individuals in the area. Just 19 Black individuals were listed, and then 12 mulatto. And this is the first instance by a census taker that I have seen in reviewing all of these different census tracts where the recorder used the race mulatto, a mixture of white and black. How that census recorder came to that determination, I'm not sure. Why the other census takers maybe did not know an individual as mulatto, there's a lot of, it was left up to their discretion to make that, check the M in the race. 49% of the individuals in the Salmon Falls census tract were white from the United States and the European countries. Occupations, everyone that was, I believe, over 19 years of age needed to list an occupation, and there were 1,105 individuals that listed an occupation, and the overwhelming bulk of them listed minor. 890 people, 81%, listed minor as an occupation. Farmer and gardener came in second with 40 individuals each. And so really a small percentage, which just really tells you what was going on in this particular census area in 1860. All of the energy was being put into mining, and that was driving the economy. There were cooks, carpenters, butchers. Minor occupations that were listed was, there were 4 physicians. 2 of those were Chinese. 3 barbers. All of those were Chinese individuals. 1 ambrotypist, Jacob Bauer from Württemberg, listed his occupation. An ambrotypist was an early photographer. So maybe he was working in the town of Salmon Falls, which was also the post office for this giant township. And kind of oddly, there was only 1 saloon keeper, George Mado from England. But the population was dispersed. There wasn't a real central area except for Salmon Falls that had a large population within it. And it was kind of difficult to get to different areas because of the steep terrain. So the other issue being is that the Chinese really didn't frequent saloons and drink alcohol. So there probably just wasn't a big demand for alcoholic beverages in the Salmon Falls Township proper. Perhaps they just went down to Sacramento County into Folsom or over to Rattlesnake Bar or Carrollton for their drinks. When we break down the population of miners by the region they came from, 1% came from North America, Canada. There were 6 men, all of them black, from the West Indies. There was also an individual that listed his origin of birth as Africa. 121 men listed occupation as minor were born in the United States. 16% of the miners came from European countries, and a whopping 68% of the miners in this area were from China. And some of the pages of the census are all Chinese individuals. So it's very possible that you could have walked up the South Fork of the American River and just seen large areas where the only people that were mining were Chinese individuals. Now, in 1863, 1864, the Central Pacific Railroad crept up past Auburn and started getting into the Sierras. They needed cheap labor, and that attracted many Chinese men, and I suspect many of them left the mines to go work for the Central Pacific in the mid-1860s, draining the population of the Chinese in this particular area. But gold mining, even as late as 1860, was difficult for the placer mining because so much of it had already been swept up and vacuumed up years earlier. But it is interesting how the census taker, that individual's perceptions kind of colored some of his entries. For instance, there were no merchants listed in the Salmon Falls area, but there were many grocers. So did the census taker equate grocer with merchant? Were grocers just those individuals that supplied just foodstuffs? And a good number of the grocers were Chinese. So I'll be putting all of this information together with all of the other census reviews I've done to get a sense of the demographics of the entire region along the North and the South Fork and the confluence, Sacramento, Placer, and El Dorado counties, of the miners and the people that lived in this region in 1860. So for history, I'm Kevin Canals.